Hey everyone, welcome back to the Direct Video Connoisseur podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and we're going to get back into our DTVC Extra series looking at the Fast and Furious franchise. Coming up, we're going to be looking at Fate of the Furious and the Hobbs and Shaw films. So we're almost done, right? We've got this one and one other one coming up. Kind of what else is on the docket for us? Next week, Ty from Comeuppance is back on. We're going to be looking at Bruce Willis, John Travolta film, Paradise City. And then the Nevsky film, Gunfight at Rio Bravo, which also has Olivier Gruner and Matthias Hughes in it. So that's what we'll be doing next week on the podcast. And then in 2 weeks, we wrap up our Fast and Furious series with Fast 9 and Fast X or Fast 10. I don't know. Is it Fast 9 or Fast 10 or Fast X? When I hear Fast X, right, I think it's like some kind of maybe like gas pill or something like that, like Gas X, right? Fast X kind of sounds like maybe it's like a better version of Gas X. And I don't know, you could see like maybe Vin Diesel, right, as Dominic Toretto doing commercials for it, right? Hey, when I've got the family over for a barbecue, I can't afford to be bloated after when I've got to look at cars, I don't know, something like that. But anyway, yeah, so that's in 2 weeks, right? So next week, Ty from Comeuppance will be looking at Bruce Willis and Travolta film Paradise City, also Steven Dorff in it, and then Gunfight at Rio Bravo. And then in 2 weeks, we will be looking at wrapping up our Fast and Furious series, looking at Fast 9 and Fast 10 or Fast X. In terms of the blog, this weekend is going to be our 1200th post. So we're looking at a film called Beach Fever, the Kato Kaelin film. I first came across this film in the late 90s when it aired on USA Up All Night and tried to tape it on USA Up All Night. My dad was watching something else, changed the channel, and I ended up not getting it. Years later, I'd always wanted to find it, so I just happened to see that it was on YouTube and figured I'd watch it. Kind of, thought it would be a good story. I have seen it now, so I've watched it in anticipation of it. I can say maybe I don't know that it was worth the wait necessarily, but I think there's gonna be a lot to talk about in there. I think it's gonna make for a good 1200th post as we kind of get nostalgic about the old days of VHS when we would tape things and kind of what that process was like, and also maybe a little I don't know if nostalgic is the right word for the OJ trial, but I think there's some stuff that we can discuss in there as well. And then upcoming posts after that, we're going to get back into the Dolph world with 4 Got 10. Like I said, I think it's like the last of the old Dolph films we've got to do. So he had a couple new ones come out this year. He had Best Man and he had Come Out Fighting. Both of those right now are $7.99 rentals on Xfinity. So I can do $5.99 ones for $1. I can get like a deal where I can get one a weekend that's $5.99 and under for $1. But for some reason, they put the new releases ones at $7.99. So it could be a little bit before we do those. And then also Eliminator, Scott Adkins film with Stu Bennett. That was a fun one that I watched a long time ago. So we'll be reviewing that one in a few weeks. So yeah, so that's what we've got on tap, both on the blog and on the podcast. Of course, check out my novels, Chad in Accounting, Girl in a Gun, and Holtman Arms. You can get all those on Amazon. There'll be links to my author page in the podcast here. My next novel, I'm hoping to get it out in August, so that's only a couple months away now. But I'm hoping in a couple months we'll have our next one. It'll be called Don's House in the Mountains. So keep an eye out for that if you're a fan of my novels. And of course, I always appreciate people who like to pick up my novels. And if you haven't read them yet, I suggest $5 on Kindle, $4.99 on Kindle. You can't go wrong there. So. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here. Actually, no, we're not taking a break. I'm sorry. We're going to do our theme song. So John Cross from After Movie Diner, who's did our theme song, we'll let him play us in for that. And then, we'll start talking about Fate of the Furious. All right, we are back, and we're going to start talking here about Fate of the Furious. I think last time when I was talking, I used the expression "goes downhill." The series goes downhill after number 7, And I think it's just one of those things where you kind of, especially doing these solo podcasts, you get on a stream of consciousness and start saying things. And yeah, it kind of doesn't come out exactly the way I wanted to. It's not that the series goes downhill, right, with number 8, but it never attains the height that it had with 7, right? Though Fate of the Furious is a really good one, it's not quite, it makes about maybe a half a billion dollars or less, or a few $100 million less than Furious 7 did. But the other thing is this is where the turmoil starts on the series, and we start to get some rifts forming, and it's not quite the family kumbaya vibe that we were getting before that. And we'll get into kind of why that happens. So, setting the stage, right? Fate of the Furious really anticipated in the sense that because 7 did so well, right? It was exciting to kind of see what they were going to do with Fate of the Furious and how that was going to work. We had Charlize Theron announced as the villain or as the baddie. We get a sense that like the story, right? It's that Vin Diesel or Dominic Toretto is essentially, he's got something being held over him that's forcing him to be a baddie. He's essentially going against his own team, right? Because the mindset is he's the only one who can take his own team, I guess, right? And so yes, and so Charlize Theron, again, they're trying to also up the baddie level, and so we had Statham as Deckard Shaw as one kind of baddie. Now we've got kind of a more diabolical plotting baddie as opposed to someone who's just going in there and beating people up and taking them down, kind of baddie that we've had before. So it is a little bit of a departure there. And I think one of the things a lot of series do this kind of thing, right? You think of like Superman, right, where there's sort of a, Superman's brain goes haywire and he starts acting like a baddie. I always remember myself, there was a cartoon, a Marvel cartoon. I think it was like, I don't know if it was like an Avengers cartoon or if it was like something where like they would do like a Captain America episode in the cartoon and then some, other characters. But I remember Captain America, like he gets shot with some kind of dart and like his eyes turn white or whatever, and he's being controlled. I can't remember who was controlling him, what baddie it was. Maybe it was the Red Skull, something like that. But they controlled him, right? So he's out there doing bad guy things when he's supposed to be a good guy. They ended up using the same concept for that in the Flash. If you remember the 90s Flash that had the dad from Dawson's Creek playing the Flash, and I also had Amanda Pays from Max Headroom. She was also in that Flash series. I don't know if you remember that from Fox. It was kind of a fun show. I want to say it lasted a season, maybe 2. But anyway, there's one where he gets shot with a dart, and it's kind of the same thing. Somebody's controlling him. I think they were actually using like a handy glove type thing to control him. But it's that idea, right? That somebody's controlling a good guy and making them into a bad guy. And how does our good guy get out of it? So it was, the series was probably overdue for that storyline. We were waiting for it and we finally got it. I mean, we kind of got it a little bit with Letty in the previous in part 6 and in that one because, right, she was kind of a bad guy. She had amnesia and we couldn't figure out. So we got a little bit of it, but we needed it, right? Kind of, I guess it was time to have, Toretto, be a bad guy that has to like, get out of a situation, right? He's a bad guy, not by choice. So we have that situation there. Again, of course, they have to kind of figure out a convenient way to turn Deckard Shaw into a good guy, which I did not see that coming, or I didn't think they were going to be capable of doing it, but they did. They pulled it off enough, I guess. I don't know. It was still a little bit of a stretch, but I guess it worked enough. And so, he's now a good guy and he's helping, after having just wanting to kill everybody and blow people up and all of that stuff in the previous movie, he's now helping them and he ends up playing a pivotal role, right, and being able to get Dominic out of the situation that he's in where Charlize Theron's Cypher character is holding, something over his head, which what he's holding over his head, right, it turns out that Elsa Pataki from Fast 5, who he has a relationship with, she has had a baby with him, right? Which he didn't know that she had a baby. So when Letty comes back in the picture, Elsa Pataki kind of rides off gracefully, right? And leaves him alone, but then she gets captured and he realizes he's got a son. Of course, with that, right, we get some major plot convenience theater because it just was not going to be comfortable for Vin Diesel to have a situation where he had an ex-wife out there, right? That he's married to Letty, he leaves her. Now he's married to this other woman. Letty comes back. Now what is he going to do about this other woman? So, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, of course, you kill the character off, right? And so it kind of wasn't a surprise when they did. I thought it was a little harsh. I was like, I don't know if they're going to actually do it, but they did it. One of those, definite plot convenience theater, just clearing up loose ends, that kind of thing. It was a bit cold that was how they dealt with her. I thought it was a little bit much, but I guess Vin Diesel, like, he just didn't like the idea of having another baby mama out there. He thought it was a little unseemly. So what we get though in that scene is the patented Vin Diesel scream when the killing happens, which I love a good Vin Diesel. Like, it's like that yell scream that he does. My favorite version of it, of course, is in the very first film when he comes back after the racing scene and they're almost arrested by the cops, and he gets away with Brian, with Paul Walker, and they come back to the house where there's a house party, and we get Vince, who's like, "Hey, what are you bringing the Buster back here for?" And Vin Diesel's like, "The Buster kept me out of handcuffs." And I just, yeah, like that I can't do the Vin Diesel scream well. I can't do the scream yell that he does, but it's always a great thing. I think maybe that and the Tom Cruise run are two of my favorite things to see in a movie. So yeah, so we do get that here when he's yelling at "Don't kill her," whatever. It's like it makes the scene worth it. Like, if we're gonna do some plot convenience theater and kill somebody off, having Vin Diesel do the scream yell is enough to get us there. So that was good. Yeah, in terms of the turmoil, right? So what happens is in this film we get a lot of scenes with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and Jason Statham, and they have a really great chemistry together. They have a great back and forth. They're really great with the banter. And I guess what happens is that people were noticing, one, that the two of them, obviously together in Furious 7, they that the responses to them were really heavy, right? That people were really enjoyed seeing both of them in the film. And I think that was part of it, was that they thought, okay, people are really responding to them. We've got to do something about this. But then also seeing the chemistry they had together, there's a thought, like, what if we made a spin-off? Like, what if we made another film? And I guess as they were towards the end of shooting, Vin Diesel found out that they wanted to do this spin-off with the two of them, and he was angry about it. I think there were other people that were angry as well. I think Tyrese was angry about it. Led to The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, posting something on Twitter about people being whiny or whatever. It was quite a deal. And I guess at some point they did kind of, have a come to Jesus moment, and they solved it or whatever. They got better about it. But what it's meant is, right, is that the Rock hasn't been in another film since the Hobbs and Shaw thing. Now Statham hadn't been either, but he is in fact he's in this like a teaser at the end of Fast 9, and then he was in Fast X or Fast 10. So he is in that one. But yeah, The Rock, and we also get a teaser at the end of Fast X that The Rock will be in that one. So he is coming back to the series, but he was out for a while. And I don't know that you really can tell in this movie that there is that animosity there. I don't know that there's anything that really comes across there. And I don't think if we had known, right? I don't know that I don't know what it would have meant for us when we watch Hobbs and Shaw. But there are some things to keep in mind here, right? Is that this film, though it doesn't do as well in the box office as Furious 7, it does at least maintain the success level, right? Because both of those movies were the number 3 film that came out that year. And while, yes, it made, so Fate of the Furious made 1.2 billion, and then, Furious 7 made 1.5 billion. So, 300 short, but it was still the number 3 film of the year. It was interesting. Disney had the top 2, right? Star Wars and Beauty and the Beast, and then Universal had the next 2, Fate of the Furious and Despicable Me. Of course, Disney also had 2 more in Guardians and Thor Ragnarok, plus the Spider-Man movie was kind of theirs as well. They had a piece of that. So, of course, Universal just has their 2, whereas Disney, this is where Disney starts to kind of really, really get the stranglehold. When we look at 2019, when we do the next segment, we'll see really where Disney comes in and just starts to really take over. But again, Fate of the Furious, it outdoes Wonder Woman, which was one that DC really had high hopes on. So it's still outperforming what people think it should be doing. And you can see from Universal's standpoint that there's a mindset of like, okay, we only have like this and Jurassic Park. So we do need to try to make more money off of this. We need to try to kind of pull more from this. And so the idea of doing films outside of the main story that Vin Diesel wanted to tell would be appealing, right? Because you could make more money. I mean, one of the things I think about Disney with the Marvel franchises, they don't do it so much with Star Wars. They do it. I guess they do it. They do more with Star Wars too, actually, when you think about it. But especially with Marvel, right? When you think about Marvel, they can put out like 3 or 4 movies a year with the Marvel franchise. And it makes it really hard for other franchises. Like, for example, Fast and the Furious, they're going to put a movie out every other year. That's really the cadence that they're going to do. But for Disney to be able to put 3 Marvel movies out in one year means that from a box office standpoint, they can not only have the one that maybe outperforms everything, it's like one of the best, but the other ones can chip away at whatever else is in the theater at that time. And you can see how like a studio like Universal would want something that they could do more with. And the Fast and the Furious franchise really lends itself to that kind of thing, more so than like Jurassic Park, their other franchise. When you think of the Fast and the Furious one, you've got all of these characters and all these stories that you can pull, that lend itself to all kinds of different things. I mean, it could be, what would you call a Fast and Furious verse, right? Or a Toretto verse? I don't know, something like that. But you could see, right, that you could really, I talked about doing DTV movies, TV series, mini series, things like that. But one of the things I discovered in kind of looking at this a little bit more was that Vin Diesel had a very clear story that he wanted to tell with this. And I don't think he didn't like the idea of side stories muddling it, which does kind of make sense, right? When you think about it, that if you have a clear arc that you want to take everything in, pulling these little side things, it's one thing for him, because sometimes he would do like these 20-minute shorts that would maybe bridge one movie to another, but it was still along the same lines of what the film was. And I think I can appreciate what he's talking about there, that he liked that he had a whole cohesive line, and he didn't like what the Fast and Furious, the Hobbs and Shaw movie was going to do with that. And I think this movie, it's interesting because what happens is, right, is that it's hard to know how much, when we get into Hobbs and Shaw, we're going to talk about this a little bit more. But this is the last film of the series to make over $1 billion, right? And it's hard to know what would have happened if we didn't get the pandemic, and the movie industry just kept moving along the way it had been moving in 2019. If either Fast 9 rebounds and does kind of what Fate of the Furious did, or if we were just going to keep having this downward progression, or if Hobbs and Shaw, accelerates that downfall, we don't really know, because with the pandemic, we're only just now kind of getting back into what 2019 was, and even that's not quite the same, right? We're still kind of in this post shakeup phase where the industry is still trying to right itself or get itself back to whatever kind of equilibrium it wants to get to. So when we look at Fate of the Furious in that mold, it does what it was supposed to do, I guess. All right, that's probably the big thing. Yes, it doesn't make exactly what Furious 7 made, but it is still the third highest earner for that year, which is what Furious 7 was. It still gets Universal something in that top 10 range. So in that sense, it's still fulfilling its blockbuster promise from the previous ones. And I don't know, I wonder if Vin Diesel was a little bit prescient, saying like, okay, if we just keep this thing going the way that I want it to go, we'll keep, maybe we didn't do exactly the number that Furious 7 did, but maybe we can keep building this thing and it will still be a solid, blockbuster franchise, and we won't dilute the product. And it is interesting because I think for me, right, my thought was like, no, and I wasn't thinking in terms of dilution, right? I was thinking in terms of potential, what you could do with this thing. And I still don't know that, like, if it were like DTV movies, right, that like if you did them on the side, that it would have had the same kind of dilution effect. But the thing is, when you get into Fate of the Furious, like, the thing is so big at this point that, yes, you almost had to have a scenario where Dom was going against everybody, because there were just too many people involved. So you needed to pull somebody out like Dom, and then have them have to fight Dom during part of it, and then they kind of come together at the end for the kind of the big finale. But there's just so many moving parts, and people don't have as many parts to play in. I mean, Roman, Tyrese's character, he's really fully into this, like, this comic relief thing, and there isn't really any room for his character to develop beyond being the goofy comic relief guy. Ludacris, there isn't any room for him to develop beyond being the computer guy. And there's a little bit of an on again off, or will they or won't they, I guess, right? With Ramsey, like maybe they'll hook up, maybe they won't. We have killed off Sung at the end of he was killed off at the end of Fast and Furious 6. So that's one less person that we need to worry about. Gal Gadot's character died out at some point too. So we are losing some people, but we're also gaining new ones. We're gaining Helen Mirren, we're gaining Jason Statham. So the whole thing is becoming big. And when you think about it, right, with the way Marvel does their movies, is they do all these individual films and then they bring it all together with a big Avengers kind of culmination thing. Whereas with Fast and the Furious, it's almost like they're always doing the Avengers thing. So I can get how Universal thought, let's pull a couple characters out and just focus on them for a film. And then we'll pick back up with Fast 9 and we'll kind of keep this train rolling. But again, Vin Diesel wasn't happy with it. Tyrese, some other people in the cast were I don't know if they were jealous or they just were resentful of it. It caused the rifts there. But then as we see when we get into Hobbs and Shaw, the whole thing takes a dip, right? And Hobbs and Shaw is not going to make anywhere near what this one made. Or I should say not anywhere. It's going to make about half of what this one made. So it's going to be interesting to see as we get in there. But this to date, this is the only other one to pull over $1 billion in the box office. I don't think Fast X is going to get there. I don't think it started off really strong and then it has died out and now it's already direct. You can already get it on streaming if you pay like $20 or something like that. I did see it in the theater, but it's kind of, I don't even know if it's still in the theater, to be honest. Like when I went and saw it in the theater a couple weeks ago, it was already down to only 4 showings on one screen in one theater in Philadelphia. I don't know if any other Philadelphia theater was showing it, other than the one that I went to. Maybe some of the ones that are kind of like more, in the outskirts of the county city limits there. But yeah, so this is kind of a watershed film because the question is, were we going to keep, it's hard to say. I don't know if you can always expect to make a $1.5 billion every time you put out one, right? So I think because this one doesn't make as much as Furious 7, that doesn't mean it's a failure, right? It's still a huge success. It's still, the third highest grossing film for that year. So the train is still running really well. But then again, at that tail end when they're shooting and they find out about Hobbs and Shaw and you get that turmoil there, it's interesting to kind of see where the thing kind of goes from there. So yeah, I used the term downhill last time. It doesn't go downhill, but I think this is still a solid effort. Beyond the fact that they kill off Elsa Pataki's character just because they just need to kill her off because she was inconvenient. Beyond that, I think this is a solid effort. It maintains what was created in Furious 7. It doesn't exceed Furious 7, but at least maintains it. It at least holds its level there. And then the series never quite gets back there again. This is the last time it stays at this level, and then it kind of drops. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next segment when we look at Hobbs and Shaw. So yeah, so what we're going to do here, we're going to take a break, and then we will come back and we'll look at Hobbs and Shaw.
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the podcast in a second, but first I have a new novel out, Holtman Arms. It follows Colvin Hall, an aspiring writer who decides to write a romance novel on a whim, sends it to a publisher, and it becomes a huge success. The only problem is, no one knows it's him because he writes under the pen name Mary Ballantyne. With all of the money and none of the fame, Colvin longs for the world to recognize his accomplishments. When he gets an opportunity to write a freelance article on a washed-up 90s pop star looking for a comeback, that recognition starts to come, but is it all he hoped for? It doesn't matter because he's getting it whether he likes it or not. Holtman Arms is the second in my author's cycle after A Girl and a Gun, and like that previous novel, it explores themes of success and accomplishment in the 21st century. You can buy it now through Amazon in paperback or on Kindle. The link is in the podcast description. As always, thanks for your support.
All right, we are back, and we are looking at Hobbs and Shaw, or Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw, I think is what it's called, right? So again, ongoing issues with me being able to say the titles of these movies because they're all kind of different. But yeah, so I think, we're going to kind of pick up where the last film left off and where there was turmoil at the end of making Fate of the Furious. And interesting thing, when you go to the Wikipedia page about Hobbs and Shaw, it brings up that Vin Diesel talked about the prospect of spin-off movies back in 2015. And so he did have in mind, because I was saying how, he subsequently said he didn't like the idea of the spin-off sort of diluting the actual story, but he did have in mind an idea about wanting to do spin-offs back at that time. And I wonder if it was because the Hobbs and Shaw one was almost, I don't know if it was released behind his back. I mean, he's not listed as a producer on or anything like that, but I don't know what the full story is behind it, but it sounds like it would have been one thing if it was Vin Diesel coming up with the idea for the spinoff, something else entirely that it was Universal's idea for the spinoff. And that's where the animosity comes in. But yeah, so we get this Hobbs and Shaw movie, and to be honest, I liked Hobbs and Shaw more. This is maybe one of the few that I liked less, watching it the second time around than I did the first time. And I think it's because the interesting thing about the Fast and Furious movies is that even as they move into this blockbuster realm, right, where you go from Fast and the Furious, the fourth one, to Fast Five, and then you go from five to six and seven, and you're starting to build into this really big blockbuster franchise. There are elements about it. And I think we've talked about this in previous episodes of the series here. There are elements about it that are not your standard action film kind of elements, and so it has it has slightly different beats. The way that they have the more team aspect versus having the individual aspects being played up. A lot of those things are kind of peeled away in this film. This film is a more traditional action film. Idris Elba plays a Superman-ish baddie, right? Like he's got superpowers as a baddie, something that we haven't really seen, that I can think of. It's interesting because when you think of The Rock, his character, Dwayne Johnson's Hobbs character, is almost like an action figure come to life, right? Or a comic book character come to life. And they make jokes throughout calling him Hulk, calling him Thor, things like that. So he's almost sort of like this larger than life figure. And so then they create a baddie that's like another level of larger than life, to be able to fight him. We get this really this villainous group that's sort of like they sort of control everything, that kind of baddie. And that's something, that's a baddie that's introduced to us here in the series that we haven't seen anywhere, and they don't get mentioned again either, which is really weird, right? That we have this sort of this side story thing with The Rock and Statham's characters, where they fight this baddie, but somehow this baddie, I don't remember that they had any real connection to like Cypher and what she was doing as a baddie. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting entry in that way. It is more standard actioner. There is a lot of the back and forth with Statham and Dwayne Johnson's character. They again have that chemistry that really works, but it has some fun spots. I mean, the Rock goes back to his home country, or goes back to his home town in American Samoa, goes back to see his family. They sort of kind of all band together to be able to fight Idris Elba's baddies that show up on the island to fight them. And so that's kind of a fun aspect to it. But yeah, there's nothing about that that's unique compared to the other movies in the series. And the result is, right, this one doesn't do anywhere near as good. It's I think it grosses like maybe 700 million overall. It doesn't break the top 10 for movies for that year in 2019. It also, what they had talked about, the fact that it did push Fast 9 back, has a bit of a knock-on effect. Right now, granted, nobody was expecting there to be a global pandemic that was going to affect the movie industry from 2020 through 2021. So you're right, nobody could see that coming. But you think about it would be interesting to note what Fast 9 would have looked like if this one hadn't happened, right? Or if it hadn't happened in a way that it pushed the other movies back. So yeah, so there's that element to it as well. And it's interesting now because when you watch Fast X, Hobbs does come there. I mean, the movie needed Hobbs. I think that was one thing, watching that movie and them fighting Jason Momoa's baddie. I think it could have used Hobbs in it as part of the team fighting everybody. So it was good that they kind of brought him in a stinger towards the end. But it's I don't know, the whole thing is I don't want to say it's sauteed in wrong sauce. I don't know that it's that bad. There's elements to it that just are off. We have Jason Statham, right? He plays, he's back as Deckard Shaw, and we get to see his sister in this. So there's a character playing his sister, and that's an interesting piece because I don't remember. I'm trying to think what I had it written down what the age difference was between the two of them. I want to say that they're like 15 years apart or something like that, but they're supposed to be playing these siblings who grew up together and like got into trouble together and stuff like that, which is interesting. So the sister's played by Vanessa Kirby, who's in the upcoming Mission Impossible film. You probably recognize her from stuff like that. Yeah, she's born in 1988, right? And I think Statham was born in 67, I believe. So they're like 21 years apart. So I think we're supposed to believe that Statham is younger than he is and that she's older than she is. but at least it seems for kind of an awkward dynamic there that they're trying to kind of shoehorn that in there and make that make sense. It would have been a little bit more interesting if instead like there was a dynamic where maybe I don't think he needs to play someone who's born in 1967, but if he plays someone who's born in maybe the mid 70s, mid to late 70s, and he has a sister who's like 10 to 15 years younger than him, and she kind of didn't grow up with him, but like they kind of grew up separately. I mean, I know from my own experience, I have siblings that are 8 and 10 years younger than me, and I grew up with them, but there's also some sort of differences that happen there too, where you experience things differently, right? It is very different. And my brother was born in 1988, so I was almost 10 when he was born. So yeah, in that sense, that was kind of a silly thing. But again, it's one of those things where it's kind of like just like silly action movie kind of stuff that you just sort of, you sort of get there. I mean, it is kind of fun in that fun action sense. I mean, there's other elements too. I mean, it's long. And I think with the Fast and Furious movies, when they get above 2 hours, like this, this one felt long for 2.5 or for 2 hours and 15 minutes. It felt like it could have ended sooner. So I think that hurt it a little bit as well. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I liked it. I liked the movie, right? I thought it was a fun movie, but yeah, it kind of missed the rest of the gang. And to that sense, again, Vin Diesel said, according to the Wikipedia ad, he said that he wanted to do spin-offs. And I think you could do spin-offs with Fast and the Furious characters, but I don't think you can do 2 hour and 15, 2.5 hour blockbuster spin-offs with Fast and the Furious characters. I think if anything showed us that, it's that. And I also kind of do wonder, part of the reason why Vin Diesel was upset was that I think he was thinking spin-offs would be like maybe him and Michelle Rodriguez having a side story or something. I don't think he was thinking that two people that were brought onto the series after the fact would have their own spin-off. I don't think he expected that. And that is a little bit of an interesting element too, right? Because to this point, well, we had Tokyo Drift. So this is the first film since Tokyo Drift that doesn't have Vin Diesel in a main role, right? Of course, he comes in at the end of Tokyo Drift, and Tokyo Drift is a very different kind of movie in the series. Right? It feels almost like if Tokyo Drift was made today, it would be a direct-to-video movie, and I think you could have made it as a direct-to-video movie as a spin-off now, but that's kind of how it feels. The main thing about that, right, is that you have Sung Kang's character, his Han character, that Vin Diesel really liked and brought him back for other things. And Justin Lin was a fan of him as an actor and brought him back for other things, so made him into a bigger character. But yeah, I mean, for the fact that we've gone this long without Vin Diesel, I think at the time I thought, oh yeah, let's do a movie without Vin Diesel, right? We could stand to have a break from Vin Diesel. But then when I'm watching it throughout the whole thing, when I'm doing these all back to back the way I did, like, oh, I don't know that maybe, The Rock and Jason Statham could carry, they could have carried another actioner on their own, but yeah, I kind of see where it kind of fell off a little bit, where people were kind of like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. The other thing too about this movie that it may not even be necessarily the lack of buzz or people being not as keen on it, because again, for me, after seeing Fate of the Furious, I did want to see Hobbs and Shaw. I did, I didn't see it in the theater. I ended up renting it after the fact, and I did enjoy it. So I don't know that it was like one of those things where people were like, oh, you're not going to like this movie, don't bother seeing it, But I think we start to see that effect where the Disney effect starts to really take hold. And I think this Hobbs and Shaw film, I think it may have been a victim of that. If you look at 2019, right? If you look at what Disney had in the theater at that time, they had Avengers Endgame, right? Of course, the juggernaut, 2 billion worldwide gross, right? They had a Lion King movie, which, millennials and their Lion King, right? They love that. So, I mean, the amount of millennials that went to the theater to see that, to like try to regain a little bit from their childhood or bringing their kids with them to see it. I mean, right. Boom, $1.6 billion. Frozen 2, right? Another big one. Spider-Man, another Spider-Man. Captain Marvel, that was really, really highly anticipated at that time. You've got, the Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker, Toy Story, another Toy Story film, right, which everybody loves. I'm kind of surprised that Aladdin did as well as it did, but it did, right? Aladdin did well. The one, like, outlier of all the movies that were in the top 10 that year is the Joker film. that was the one that nobody expected to do as big as it did. And that was the one where people kind of end of the year were like, I kind of could use something different. And they went for the Joker film. But what you're seeing at this time is now Disney is getting to that point where they are starting to employ that stranglehold approach to the theater. You've got, Endgame, right? Avengers Endgame, huge Marvel film at that time. Pixar movie in Toy Story, Frozen, right? Live action movies in Aladdin and Lion King, Captain Marvel, another Marvel film, Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker, right? A Star Wars movie. So they're able to go into the theater at any time and put maybe 3 or 4 blockbusters in there. And so if you're Universal, if you're, Warner Brothers with Joker, which again, they kind of were able to luck out there, but if you're going into the theater in the summer, right? And again, they were kind of a slightly later summer blockbuster. I think it was supposed to be out in at the end of July and ended up coming out at the beginning of August. I think they pushed it back a week. I'm not sure exactly how that happened. So actually no. Oh, okay. So it was supposed to actually come out in the middle of July, and they pushed it back to the end to the beginning of August. And I think part of the reason why it didn't really say necessarily why they did that, but I think part of the reason might have been because they wanted to maybe get it in the theater at a time that was a little bit more advantageous. But you're seeing, right, where Disney can really, really clog up the theater with their films. And it doesn't matter for them so much if like one of them underperforms, because the other 3 are going to be there. Or, if 2 of them underperform, it's just enough to make the Universal Pictures, the Hobbs and Shaw film underperform, or, whatever it was. I think we use the example of the Terminator series, right? That's another one that you can think about that like try to, Dark Fate comes out in 2019. Same thing, right? And Dark Fate does worse than this, right? Dark Fate, I think, did like 400 million in the theater. So this is probably the Disney effect really coming home to roost. And I think it just happened to be the wrong time. I don't know what would have happened if they had foregone Hobbs and Shaw, and if they had just gone straight to Fast 9, right, or F9, or whatever it was called, right, whatever the title for it. But if they'd gone just straight to that one and not put this one in there, what would have happened? If maybe Fast 9 does well, because we can't really judge how well Fast 9 did, because it came out in that second pandemic year, right, 2021, where people were starting to go to the theater again, but they not quite to the level, right, that they, especially not worldwide. If you're in red state Texas, you can jam up the theater with, have 10 more people than the capacity and you're perfectly fine. But, here in the Northeast, for example, we were kind of in between that. In Philadelphia is a city that was like in between, being stricter, not stricter. But, not everybody wanted to go to the theater either. A lot of people were like, I'm not in the mood. I remember for me, I want to start going to baseball games again. And April, May of 2021. And, at that time, it was like you could be outside, but, we hadn't been vaccinated yet. And so there was a sense of like, I wanted to go to games. My wife was like, well, can you just at least wait till you get vaccinated? I was like, okay, yeah, I'll wait. So I think the first game I saw was in June. I think it was like they vaccinated. I think my second vaccine shot was like, end of May, something like that, of 2021. So you can see, right, that like, and even at that time, there were a lot of stadiums, right, where they didn't have full capacity, because, we were still at the point where even like being outside, right, it was like, is that enough? Now, of course, everything's full capacity, everything's okay again. And we're still kind of getting things back on track from there. But it is interesting to note, like, if, I don't know, in the environment of 2019, it's possible that maybe Fast 9 wouldn't have done as well either, that this might have just been a victim of what Disney was pulling at the time, and how it could, how it was really, really employing its strategy to choke off the theater like that. Because it's just, and I mean, they had, I mean, when you look at Disney, when you look at the top 10 for that year, right? Joker's like the only one that, I think Joker and Jumanji are the only ones that aren't either Disney or Disney related, because Disney was part of Spider-Man Far From Home. So, and of the 9 films that did over $1 billion that year, Disney was involved in all of them but Joker, right? Because that was the Warner Brothers one. And it was a surprise. I think we were thinking maybe that would maybe be a watershed moment, that maybe these films might be a little bit different coming, after Joker, that we might see something a little different coming. Joker cost like $60 million to make it. It's a very different kind of comic book movie. But yeah, I kind of can see, like, I don't know. I can kind of see how I don't. Yeah, it's hard to know if it was Hobbs and Shaw's fault that the movie like didn't perform as well. I think it is slightly unremarkable. Maybe that's really what it was. I don't know that it was Fast and Furious fatigue because they were putting out a new movie every 2 years. But there is a sense too, right, that you're not you're this is almost like a placeholder while we're watching the series, and maybe that's part of it too. I was trying to think if there's any kind of equivalent to that, that like like when you're watching whatever the series is, right, that you would have like another version of it that would I don't know. I was trying to think of any kind of equivalent or something that would be similar. I mean, I almost want to say it's like if I was trying to think of maybe there's a sports equivalent. Um, yeah, I mean, it's almost like, right, if you're a football fan, if an NFL football fan, right, and that like midweek you've got nothing to watch, so you put a hockey game on, and you're like, I like hockey, but I don't, I really want to watch football when that comes up. And almost like if they canceled hockey or they canceled the NFL for that weekend and put only hockey on, and you're like, I mean, of course I like hockey better than the NFL, but I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know, because when you're trying to go back to that time in 2019 when this came out, I think that was a big piece of it, was that we wanted to see what the story was how it was going to continue after Fate of the Furious, right? Because that's kind of how Fast and the Furious movies work, is that like every 2 years we get a new installment in the series and we get to see what the whole crew does. And this was, as a spin-off, right, it felt like a placeholder as opposed to like something that we're getting in addition to the normal cadence of every 2 years. So that may have hurt it as well too, is that it wasn't an actual Fast and Furious movie, right? It was some sort of placeholder that was inserted into this ecosystem that Disney had created that just pushed everything out, and it just didn't have the muscle as a spin-off or a placeholder kind of movie. It didn't have the muscle to force its way in and grab that. But I wonder, if you look at the fact that the Joker was one that pulled $1 billion that year, had this been Fast 9, right, the movie that people were anticipating, there was room in the ecosystem for one movie to eke out that kind of existence. I wonder if they could have done it. I wonder if they could have done that. So it is interesting to think about with this series, because this is the one where the thing turns. And granted, it turns because again, I don't know, because with the pandemic the whole thing gets shaken up, right? And so this Disney approach to filmmaking kind of falls off a bit. And even Disney itself, right, they're getting a little bit of diminishing returns. So I think that the Guardians of the Galaxy movie still did well. But that the Ant-Man film didn't do as well. And I think the other thing too, of course, is that they were really pushing Jonathan Edwards, I think is the actor's name. I'm pulling a blank here. But they're really, really banking on him to be kind of the star as Kang the Conqueror. And then of course he's got domestic violence allegations out there about him. So let's see Jonathan, because I think that was it's hard to know. I think I've got his name wrong here, so sorry, but I'm not good with names, and it just sort of just bleeds into me doing these podcasts where I start going off on a tangent and think I've got it going. So so sorry about that. But yeah, it's Jonathan Majors, that's his name. Who is Jonathan Edwards? Isn't he the guy who talked to ghosts or something on a TV show in the 90s? Jonathan Majors. So the issues that he's been dealing with, it's kind of derailed things a bit, and maybe there is more room for something new. But I don't know. Fast X didn't do it. It started off good, but then didn't do as well as they were looking for. I think the one thing we can say post pandemic is that we're at least back to blockbusters being king. Whether it means that Disney will be able to dominate with the franchises that it has, that it can use to really choke up the theater that way, if that's going to go back to that thing. But it definitely means that like your romantic comedies, your comedic romps, those kinds of films, they're not going to cut it in the theater anymore. It's kind of full on back to blockbusters. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see. I mean, it almost kind of feels like with Fast and Furious, with them sort of winding this thing down, that they're almost kind of winding it down at the right time. I know from Universal's standpoint, they're going to be scrambling to find something to take its place. I mean, Fast and Furious kind of came out of nowhere for them as something that could be strong enough. And they gambled at the wrong time with Hobbs and Shaw. They gambled at a time thinking that, okay, if we can keep building this thing and spin it off and have the spin-offs be big as well, we can really keep generating these billion-dollar properties. And unfortunately, they did it at the time when really Disney launched its full offensive in 2019 with, the Marvel movie, the biggest Marvel movie, of course, Avengers, but also Captain Marvel, with, their live action Disney films, with, their that Star Wars film, with Pixar films. They kind of really went all for it and just flooded the flooded the theaters with their films that year. And Hobbs and Shaw, as a placeholder film, as a spin-off, didn't have the muscle to maintain itself in that ecosystem. You wonder if, I don't know, like what it would have looked like if 2021 hadn't been a pandemic year and they put out Fast 9. Maybe that would have been one that kind of rebounded the series, and it does kind of push back. But the other thing too is I think there is a little bit of fatigue with the Disney movies, with the Marvel movies at least. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what these live action. I didn't see what happened with the live action Little Mermaid. I think the other thing with the live action Little Mermaid is that's a little bit old for millennials, right? Like Lion King is just firm in there with those millennials who love Disney stuff and love that kind of thing. Same with the Toy Stories. That's like really in their wheelhouse. And that's the other piece of it, right? Is that when you're trying to market to different generations, right, for the nostalgia factor, my generation, Gen X, we don't have, there aren't as many of us out there, right? Or Gen Z, the younger ones. So they really want to hit those millennials and get them in the theater. And they love the Marvel movies too, right? But if they're starting to get fatigue from them, I mean, they're getting up in age too, right? Millennials are starting to turn 40. So they're kind of getting that same feeling of not wanting to sit in the theater for 3 hours and watch a movie. So it is interesting to see. Part of me thinks that the Fast and Furious series is winding down at the right time. That give the theaters to Marvel, let them do what they're going to do with it, or sorry, not to Marvel, to Disney. But it also kind of is a little bit sad too to think about the fact that, I mean, we're going to see what happens with the Mission Impossible series. We'll see how that one does in the theater. But it kind of just seems like now, if we get back to what that Disney ecosystem was, it's essentially going to be like one movie that's not a Disney movie that breaks $1 billion, and then everything else is Disney. That's what we're going to be looking at for our top 10s going forward. And it's just going to be like, who has the movie that year that breaks through? I hope it doesn't go back to that. I hope, more stories and more films have room to grow, and we get another Fast and Furious. We get something else that kind of comes out of nowhere that we weren't expecting. The Joker was that movie in 2019. That was the Joker in 2019 was Fast 5, right? Or Fast or Furious 7, right? That's what the Joker was. I mean, I think probably the best example for that, the best comp is Fast 5 for what the Joker did. And every year we kind of get one movie like that is that the one that kind of goes against what everybody's predicting and outperforms. And then it's a matter of how the studios pounce on it to be able to make it into something more. I don't know. I mean, the Joker's an interesting one because it's an R-rated film series, and I hope they don't move to PG-13 with the next one. I don't think they will, but it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to carry that one off and have something as successful as that one. But I think it's also a sign too that there are older, more mature audiences out there that are looking for things beyond, Disney nostalgia or fun Marvel romps. And Fast and the Furious is kind of wrapping up at a time when maybe we could have used them more, but the most recent one didn't perform as well as they were expecting it to, and really none of them perform as well as Furious 7. And after Fate of the Furious, we kind of an end of an era there for them. But they still got to finish this thing off, right? So we've still got Fast 9. The studio, I mean, Universal still wanted there to be. They still wanted the sequels. And according to Vin Diesel, when Fast X was first came out, they were pushing for not just a sequel, but they were saying they wanted a third one. So but yeah, I mean, when you look at 2021, Fast 9 doesn't do like in the billions, but it is still a top 10. It's a top 5 movie that year. So in that sense, it is. And actually, I say top 5 movie. But if you don't count movies from China, it's a top 3 again. So they're back in the top 3. So it's just, the problem is it's not going to be able to pull that billion number again. And I don't know, if another one will. But so they are able to rebound. But it does kind of make you think that if Fast 9 had come out in this 2019 ecosystem, it may have pushed through and had the muscle to to fight, against Disney like that. But I don't know. We'll kind of see. We'll kind of see what happens there. But yeah, and that's where we'll be kind of picking up when we get back in here next time, is we'll be looking at Fast 9 and Fast X as we kind of complete this series looking at the Fast and Furious films. I'm kind of surprised. It's been a lot more fun. It's been, to be honest, it's been fun to sort of analyze the film industry and kind of go back in history and talk about these films this way, and sort of look at the way the movie industry was and kind of the things that happened with the series and that kind of thing. So hope that you've been enjoying this as well. But yeah, why don't we wrap up here? Before we wrap up, of course, it's just me, so I'm going to do my plugs. The website, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. Go there for everything direct-to-video connoisseur. So we have links to my novels there, links to this podcast if you're not already subscribed to it. Links to social media are there as well, so you can check everything out there. I'm on Letterboxd as well. There are links to the Letterboxd on the site, but I think it's direct-to-video connoisseur, or maybe I'm DTV connoisseur on Letterboxd. So you can go on there. If you look at the upcoming films watch list, that'll give you a sense of what reviews might be coming. And then if you look at the watch list one, those are films that I'm thinking about watching for future reviews. So you can go there and check out, kind of see what we've got on tap. I also have some lists there. I've got a list of my top Dolph Lundgren films. I've got top Dolph Lundgren, Gary Daniels, Albert Pyun, Cynthia Rothrock, and then I also have a PM Entertainment list. So you can always go there and check out the list that we have there. I'm probably going to put out a Fast and Furious one once we're all done with all of this. And then of course my novels, as I've mentioned before, Holtman Arms is the most recent one. Link to that, link to my author page into that book in the description for this podcast. Also, Girl and a Gun and Chad in Accounting. And again, hopefully in the next couple of months we'll have my fourth novel out, Don's House in the Mountain. But definitely, pick up my novels. I always appreciate people that are interested in reading my work, and let me know what you think of them as well. I'll always appreciate that. Well, all right. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll catch up with you soon. Bye, everyone.
Direct to video,